I stood in the doorway of Romano's, scanning the elegant dining room with its crisp white tablecloths and soft amber lighting, looking for my parents. When I spotted them at a corner table, my stomach dropped. Their plates were empty, wine glasses drained, and dessert dishes scraped clean. My mother Patricia looked up with that familiar smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Oh, you're late. Cover the bill, will you?" My sister Jessica burst into laughter from across the table, still as clueless as ever. The leather bill folder sat prominently between them like a trap waiting to spring. In that moment, standing there in my work clothes after rushing through traffic to celebrate their 35th anniversary, I realized something that made my blood run cold. I had been invited to arrive exactly when their meal ended. I walked slowly toward their table, my mind racing as I processed what I was seeing. The elegant atmosphere of Romano's suddenly felt suffocating. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the cream-colored walls, and the gentle murmur of other diners seemed to fade into background noise as I approached my family. Happy anniversary. I managed forcing a smile as I pulled out the empty chair they'd saved for me. The seat was cold, clearly unused throughout their entire meal. Patricia smoothed her silver hair and adjusted her pearl necklace. "Thank you, sweetheart. We had the most wonderful lobster thermidor. Your father insisted on the wine pairing, too." David nodded, patting his rounded belly with satisfaction. "Excellent vintage. 2012 Bordeaux." He glanced at the bill folder with theatrical casualness. "Worth every penny." Jessica leaned back in her chair, twirling a strand of her auburn hair around her finger. "Mom ordered the chocolate souffle for dessert, said it was divine." I stared at the remnants of their feast, feeling a familiar knot forming in my stomach. Empty lobster shells, traces of rich sauce on their plates, and 2 empty wine bottles standing like sentries beside the table. They'd clearly enjoyed themselves thoroughly. "I thought we were having dinner together," I said quietly. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we got hungry and started without you. Traffic, you know how it is." But as I reached for my wallet, our waiter approached the table to refill water glasses. I caught him glancing at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between sympathy and recognition. "Everything satisfactory this evening?" he asked, his voice carrying a professional warmth. "Absolutely perfect," Patricia gushed, "though we're ready for the check now." As the waiter moved away, I heard him speak quietly to his colleague at the nearby service station. "That's the family I told you about, the one with the 2 sons." My hand froze halfway to my back pocket. 2 sons. "What's taking so long?" Jessica asked, tapping her manicured nails on the table. "Some of us have places to be." I stood up abruptly. "I need to use the restroom." Instead, I walked directly to the service station where the waiters were organizing silverware. My heart pounded as I approached the young man who'd served my parents. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice low. "Did you say something about 2 sons?" He looked around nervously, then leaned closer. "Are you Alan or Marcus?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Alan, how do you—" "Your parents have done this before?" "Multiple times. They call one son or the other to join them right when they're ready for the check." He shook his head sympathetically. "Usually Marcus, but sometimes you. They've got it down to a science timing-wise." My legs felt weak. How many times? At least 6 or 7 times in the past year. Always the same routine. Nice dinner, expensive wine, then whoever shows up gets handed the bill. He glanced back toward my table, where my family was growing visibly impatient. "I assumed you knew." I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. Marcus, my older brother who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years after a bitter argument about family responsibilities. The brother who I thought had abandoned us all. "They told me Marcus doesn't help with family expenses anymore," I whispered. The waiter's expression grew even more sympathetic. "Sir, he was here 2 weeks ago. Same setup. They'd finished their anniversary dinner early and called him to join them for dessert and coffee, left him with a $200 tab. I walked back to the table on unsteady legs, my mind reeling. Patricia was checking her watch with exaggerated impatience, while David studied the dessert menu despite having clearly already eaten. Finally, Jessica said, we were about to send a search party. I sat down heavily, staring at my family with new eyes. The expensive clothes, the confident way they'd ordered premium items, the casual assumption that I would pay without question. How long had this been going on? How long had they been playing Marcus and me against each other while using us both? "The bill, sweetheart," Patricia said, sliding the leather folder toward me with practiced ease. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't immediately reach for it. Instead, I looked directly at my mother and asked, "Why didn't you tell me Marcus helps with family expenses too?" The color drained from Patricia's face so quickly, I thought she might faint. Jessica's nervous laughter died in her throat, and David suddenly became very interested in straightening his tie. "I don't know what you mean," Patricia stammered, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. I knew then that everything I'd believed about my family, about my role as the responsible son, about Marcus's supposed selfishness, was built on lies. And I was about to find out just how deep those lies went. I leaned forward in my chair, studying my parents' faces as the silence stretched between us. The elegant background music of Romano's continued playing, but our table had become an island of tension in the middle of the bustling restaurant. The waiter told me something interesting. I said, my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. "He said Marcus has been here multiple times this year, paying for dinners just like this one." Patricia's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. "I'm sure there's been some mistake." "No mistake, Mom. He described the exact same scenario. You and Dad finish eating, then call one of your sons to join you, just in time to cover the check." David cleared his throat, his face reddening above his starched collar. "Now, Alan, you're making this sound much more calculated than it really is." "Calculated," I repeated, feeling my voice rise slightly. "You mean like how you told me Marcus was too proud to help with family problems while apparently taking his money to—" Jessica shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting between our parents and me. "Alan, maybe you should just calm down." "Don't tell me to calm down." I turned to face my sister directly. "How long have you known about this? How long have you watched our parents manipulate both their sons while turning us against each other?" Jessica's face flushed crimson. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" I pressed. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Mom and Dad have been running a pretty successful con game." Patricia finally spoke, her voice shaky but defiant. "We never asked for anything we didn't need." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Need you. Needed lobster thermidor and $20 glasses of wine. You needed to dine at the most expensive restaurant in town." "We work hard," David interjected. "We deserve to enjoy our retirement." "Your retirement that's apparently being funded by your children's guilt and manipulation, chapiu." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I watched as my parents exchanged a look that confirmed everything I'd suspected. This wasn't desperation or genuine need. This was a system they'd developed, refined, and executed with practiced precision. "How much money have you taken from us?" I asked quietly. "We haven't taken anything," Patricia protested. "Our sons help us because they love us." "Our sons help you because you've made them believe the other one doesn't care." I pulled out my phone, placing it on the table between us. "I'm going to call Marcus right now. I'm going to ask him directly what he knows about these family dinners." Jessica reached across the table, her hand moving toward my phone. "Alan, don't." "Why not?" I challenged, pulling the phone back. "What exactly are you afraid he'll tell me?" David's shoulders sagged slightly, and I saw something break in his expression. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me. Explain how you justified lying to both your sons about the other one. Explain how you sleep at night knowing you've kept your children apart with deception." Patricia's composure finally cracked completely. Tears began streaming down her cheeks, smearing her carefully applied makeup. We never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? I demanded. We just needed some help, she sobbed. After your father's business struggled, after we made some bad investments, we just needed to maintain our lifestyle until things turned around. What bad investments? David loosened his tie, looking suddenly older than his 68 years. The vacation rental property in Florida. We thought it would provide steady income, but the market collapsed. We're still paying the mortgage on a place that's worth half what we paid for it. So you decided to make your sons pay for it without telling them. We told you both that we were struggling financially, Patricia said defensively. You told us you were struggling. You didn't tell us you were living beyond your means and expecting us to subsidize it. I gestured around the expensive restaurant. This isn't struggling, Mom. This is indulgence, funded by deception. Jessica finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. They've been taking money from both of you for almost 2 years. The admission hit like a slap. 2 years. Emergency car repairs, medical bills, house maintenance, Jessica listed miserably. They'd call you for one thing, Marcus for another. Always keeping track of who they'd asked for what, so the stories wouldn't overlap. I stared at my sister in disbelief. And you knew. I tried to tell them to stop, she said weakly. But they said it was temporary just until they got back on their feet. Back on their feet. I looked around the table at my family, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in my adult life. When exactly were you planning to get back on your feet? When your sons had given you everything they had? Patricia reached across the table toward me. Alan, you have to understand. We never wanted to hurt you or Marcus. I pulled my hand away from hers. But you did hurt us. You turned us against each other. You made us both believe the other didn't care about family. You've stolen 2 years of brotherhood from us. The weight of that loss settled over me like a heavy blanket. 2 years of thinking my brother had abandoned our family. 2 years of carrying the burden alone, believing I was the only son who cared enough to help. 2 years of resentment and hurt that had been built on carefully constructed lies. We can fix this, David said desperately. We can make this right. How? I asked. How do you make right 2 years of manipulation and lies? But even as I asked the question, I realized I already knew what I had to do. I had to call Marcus. I had to learn the truth about what our parents had done to both of us. And then somehow, I had to figure out how to rebuild the relationship with my brother that our parents had systematically destroyed. The bill folder still sat on the table between us, but for the first time in years, I had no intention of reaching for it. I stood up from the table without another word, my chair scraping against Romano's polished hardwood floor. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence that had settled over our corner of the restaurant. "Where are you going?" Patricia called after me, panic evident in her voice. "To call my brother," I said without turning around. I walked through the restaurant's main dining area, past couples sharing intimate conversations and families celebrating special occasions, until I reached the entrance lobby. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside onto the sidewalk, and I realized my hands were shaking as I scrolled through my phone contacts. Marcus, the number I hadn't dialed in 3 years. I pressed call and listened to it ring, my heart hammering against my ribs. Part of me hoped he wouldn't answer. Part of me dreaded what I might learn. But mostly I just needed to hear my brother's voice again. Alan. Marcus's voice was sharp with surprise and something that might have been anger. "What do you want?" The hostility in his tone was like a knife to the chest. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about Mom and Dad." "Oh, now you want to talk about them after ignoring every attempt I made to discuss their situation for the past 3 years. I closed my eyes, leaning against Romano's brick exterior wall. "What are you talking about? You're the one who stopped helping them." "Stopped helping them?" Marcus's voice rose incredulously. "Alan, I've been sending them money every month for 2 years. Where the hell have you been?" The sidewalk seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Every month. Car payments, medical expenses, house repairs, emergency dental work for Dad. They said you were too busy with your own life to care about family anymore. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. They told me you were too proud to accept that they needed help. They said you thought they should handle their own problems. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was quieter, more uncertain. They told you I wouldn't help. They told me you said they made their own bed and should lie in it. I never said that. I would never say that. Marcus paused, and I could hear traffic noise in the background. Alan, where are you right now? Outside Romano's restaurant. They invited me to their anniversary dinner, but when I got here, they'd already finished eating. They expected me to pay the $300 bill. $300. Marcus's voice was tight with recognition. Did they order the lobster thermidor? My blood ran cold. How did you know that? Because they pulled the exact same stunt with me 2 weeks ago. Anniversary dinner already finished eating when I arrived, stuck me with the check for the lobster and wine pairing. I slid down the brick wall until I was sitting on the sidewalk, my head spinning. They've been doing this to both of us. How long? Marcus asked, and I could hear the same realization dawning in his voice. The waiter said at least 6 or 7 times this year. They alternate between us. Jesus Christ. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Alan, they called me last month asking for $1,500 for emergency roof repairs. They said a storm damaged the shingles and they needed immediate work done or the insurance wouldn't cover water damage. Did you give it to them? Of course I gave it to them. They're our parents. His voice cracked slightly. They said you'd refuse to help because you were saving for a vacation. I thought about the phone call I'd received just 3 weeks ago. Patricia crying about unexpected medical bills saying the insurance had denied Dad's procedure and they needed $2,000 immediately. She'd sobbed about how Marcus had told them he couldn't afford to help with their problems anymore. Marcus, they asked me for money 3 weeks ago, medical bills. They said you told them you couldn't afford to help with their problems. I never said that. His voice was raw with hurt and anger. I've never said that. Even when my own finances were tight, I found a way to help them. We both fell silent, the weight of our parents' deception settling over us like a suffocating blanket. For 3 years, we'd been angry at each other for abandoning family responsibilities. For 3 years, we'd each believed the other had turned his back on Mom and Dad. For 3 years, we'd carried resentment and hurt that had been manufactured by the very people we'd been trying to help. They played us, Marcus said finally, his voice hollow. They turned us against each other so we wouldn't compare notes. All this time, I thought you didn't care about them anymore. After Dad's heart scare 2 years ago when you didn't call, I figured you'd written them off. My throat tightened. I didn't know about Dad's heart scare. They never told me. What? Marcus's voice sharpened. It was a minor episode, but he spent the night in the hospital. Mom said she'd called you and you were too busy to visit. She never called me. I would have come immediately. Alan, what else? Haven't they told us about each other? I thought about all the family updates I'd missed, all the conversations that had apparently happened without me, all the times I'd felt guilty for being the only son who still cared about our parents' welfare. I don't know, I admitted, but I think we need to find out. Where are they now? Still sitting at their table inside, probably wondering if I'm going to come back and pay their bill. Marcus laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Are you? Not a chance. I stood up, brushing dust off my pants. Marcus, I know we have a lot to work through, but right now I think we need to figure out what they've really been doing with the money we've been sending them. You think there's more? I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. Where do you want to meet? For the first time in 3 years, I was going to see my brother. The brother I'd missed terribly but been too proud and hurt to contact. The brother who it turned out had been missing me just as much. There's a coffee shop on 5th Street called The Daily Grind. Can you meet me there in 20 minutes? I'll be there. As I hung up the phone, I realized I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to family situations. I wasn't alone. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had an ally. Someone who understood exactly what I was going through because he'd been living it too. I walked back into Romano's where my parents and Jessica were huddled together in intense conversation. They looked up as I approached, hope and fear warring in their expressions. "Well," Patricia asked anxiously. I picked up the bill folder and placed it directly in front of my father. "Pay your own check, Dad. I'm done being your ATM." And for the first time in my adult life, I walked away from my parents without looking back. The daily grind buzzed with evening energy students hunched over laptops and couples sharing desserts in cozy corner booths. I chose a table near the back, my leg bouncing nervously as I waited for Marcus. 3 years. 3 years since I'd seen my older brother's face, and now we were meeting because our parents had orchestrated an elaborate deception that had torn our family apart. When Marcus walked through the door, my breath caught. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, with new lines around his eyes and gray threading through his dark hair. But his shoulders still carried that same confident set, and when our eyes met across the coffee shop, I saw the same mixture of hurt and hope that I felt in my own chest. He approached the table cautiously as if I might disappear if he moved too quickly. "Alan." "Marcus." I stood awkwardly, unsure whether to shake his hand or attempt a hug. We settled for a brief, stiff embrace that spoke volumes about the distance between us. We ordered coffee and sat across from each other, the small round table feeling like a chasm. Marcus looked older up close, and I wondered if he was thinking the same about me. "I brought something," Marcus said, pulling out his phone. After we hung up, I started thinking about all the things that never quite added up. So I did some digging. He opened his photo gallery and turned the phone toward me. Mom's Facebook page from last month. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hands. The photo showed Patricia and David at what looked like an expensive wine tasting event, both of them laughing and holding glasses of champagne. Patricia wore a dress I'd never seen before, something that looked like it cost more than my monthly car payment. "Napa Valley Wine Tour," Marcus said grimly. "Posted 3 days after she called me crying about the emergency roof repairs." He swiped to the next photo. David standing beside a gleaming new set of golf clubs, grinning broadly. "Posted 2 weeks after they asked you for money for his medical bills." My stomach churned. How long have you been documenting this?" I started screenshotting things about 6 months ago when I noticed the disconnect between their supposed financial struggles and their social media posts. Marcus swiped through more images. Dinner at the Capitol Grill, shopping trip to Nordstrom, tickets to the symphony, all posted around the same times they were calling us for emergency money. I leaned back in my chair feeling sick. They've been using our money to fund their entertainment. It gets worse. Marcus opened Instagram on his phone. Patricia's account. "Look at this post from her book club meeting." The image showed an elegant living room filled with well-dressed women, a table groaning under the weight of catered appetizers and several bottles of premium wine prominently displayed. The caption read, "Hosting the girls tonight. Nothing but the best for my book club ladies. Grateful for sons who understand that family comes first." "Sons who understand that family comes first," I repeated slowly. She's bragging about manipulating us. Marcus scrolled through more posts. Here's another one. "Some people complain about their adult children not supporting them. I'm blessed with boys who know how to take care of their parents. Smart planning pays off." Posted the same day she called you for medical bill money. I felt like I was going to be sick. Smart planning. She's calling it smart planning. There's more. Marcus showed me a group photo from what appeared to be an upscale restaurant. Patricia and David sat at the center of a large table surrounded by other couples their age, all raising glasses in a toast. Her caption says, "Dinner with the gang, love being able to treat our friends to the good life. Some secrets to success include raising generous children." "Secrets to success," I whispered. She's treating us like a business strategy. Marcus put his phone down and looked directly at me. Alan, I've been tracking the money I've sent them over the past 18 months. Do you want to know the total I wasn't sure I could handle the answer, but I nodded. $42,000? The number hit me like a physical blow. 42,000. Car repairs that turned out to be a car upgrade. Medical bills for procedures that were fully covered by insurance. Emergency home repairs for problems that either didn't exist or were minor cosmetic improvements. Marcus's voice was steady, but I could see the anger burning in his eyes. What about you? I did quick mental calculations, thinking back over all the emergency calls, all the times I'd dipped into my savings or charged my credit card to help my struggling parents. At least 30,000, maybe 35. So between the two of us, they've taken at least $75,000 in the past year and a half. I put my head in my hands. $75,000 that we thought was going to necessities. $75,000 they've been using to live like wealthy retirees while telling each of us that the other son doesn't care about family. We sat in silence for several minutes, the magnitude of the deception washing over us. Around us, the coffee shop continued its evening rhythm, but our table felt isolated from the normal world where parents didn't systematically defraud their children. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. I think they're in deeper financial trouble than they've admitted to either of us. What do you mean? I drove past their house last week. There's a second mortgage sign in the yard. My blood ran cold. A second mortgage. And I happened to run into their neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She mentioned that Mom and Dad have been talking about downsizing, maybe moving to a smaller place. They never mentioned anything about downsizing to me, because they're probably hoping to keep extracting money from us long enough to avoid having to sell the house. Marcus leaned forward. Alan, I think we've been funding not just their lifestyle, but their attempts to avoid facing their real financial problems. I thought about the house I'd grown up in, the 4-bedroom colonial with the big backyard where Marcus and I had played as kids. The house our parents had lived in for over 30 years, the house that represented stability and success in their minds. What do we do? I asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I think we need to know the whole truth. All of it. How much they owe. How much they've been spending. How long this has been going on. And then we decide whether our parents are people we can have a relationship with. The words hung in the air between us. For our entire lives, family loyalty had been presented as an unquestionable value. The idea that we might choose to step away from our parents felt revolutionary and terrifying at the same time. I missed you, I said suddenly, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Marcus's expression softened. I missed you too. These past 3 years, every time something good or bad happened, you were the first person I wanted to call. Why didn't you? Same reason you didn't call me. Pride, hurt, the belief that you'd chosen them over me. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. They stole 3 years from us, Marcus. 3 years of being brothers. But we're here now, he said, squeezing my hand. And this time we're going to face them together. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something that might have been hope. Not just hope that we could confront our parents and demand accountability, but hope that my brother and I might actually emerge from this closer than we'd been before their manipulation drove us apart. So what's our plan? I asked. Marcus smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the big brother who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework. We're going to set a trap, and we're going to make sure they walk right into it. The next evening I sat across from my parents at Romano's once again, but this time everything was different. This time I had a purpose beyond simply paying their bill. This time I was hunting. Marcus had helped me plan every detail of what we were calling Operation Truth. Hidden in my jacket pocket was my phone recording every word of our conversation. Marcus waited outside in his car, ready to join us when I gave the signal. We'd agreed that catching our parents in their manipulation required letting them reveal their true nature without knowing they were being watched. Alan's sweetheart, Patricia said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. I'm so glad you called and suggested getting together again. I was worried after how upset you seemed yesterday. I forced a smile, my stomach churning at her performance of maternal concern. I wanted to apologize for overreacting. You know how stress affects me. David nodded sagely. Financial pressure can make anyone tense. We understand. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me, considering they'd been the source of significant financial pressure in my life for the past 2 years. Actually, I said, taking a deep breath, I've been thinking about what you said about family taking care of each other, and I want to do something special. Patricia's eyes lit up with interest. Oh. Dad's 70th birthday is coming up next month. I watched their faces carefully as I continued. I'd like to throw him a surprise party. Here at Romano's, something really memorable. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. Patricia straightened in her chair, her eyes sparkling with excitement. David leaned forward, trying to appear modest, but clearly thrilled. Oh, Alan, that's such a thoughtful idea, Patricia gushed. But a party here would be quite expensive. I want it to be special. I insisted, pulling out a notepad I'd brought as a prop. I'm thinking maybe 30 people, family or close friends, maybe some of Dad's old business associates. David cleared his throat. 30 people would require reserving the private dining room. Perfect. What would something like that cost? Patricia and David exchanged a look that made my skin crawl. I could practically see the dollar signs reflecting in their eyes. Well, Patricia said carefully, for 30 people in the private room with cocktail hour, a premium dinner menu, wine service. She trailed off, doing calculations in her head. Don't worry about the cost, I said. Dad deserves the best. That was apparently all the encouragement they needed. Patricia dove into party planning with an enthusiasm that would have been touching if I didn't know what was really motivating her. We'll definitely want the filet mignon option, she said, making notes on a napkin. None of that chicken nonsense for David's 70th. And the wine pairing is essential. Absolutely, David agreed. Maybe we could upgrade to the premium bar package too. My friends appreciate quality liquor. I nodded eagerly, making notes on my pad. Whatever you think is best. Oh, and flowers, Patricia added. We'll need beautiful centerpieces for each table, and perhaps a small ensemble for background music. A string quartet would be lovely, David suggested. Very elegant. I was amazed at how quickly they'd abandoned any pretense of modesty or concern about expense. Within 15 minutes, they'd planned a party that would cost well over $5,000, all while assuming I would pay for every penny of it. This is going to be wonderful, Patricia said, practically glowing with excitement. David, can you imagine the look on everyone's faces when they see how beautifully Alan has honored you? The phrasing made my stomach turn. How Alan has honored you. Not how we've planned together or how the family is celebrating. They were already taking credit for my supposed generosity while simultaneously making it clear that payment was my responsibility. Should we book the date? I asked innocently. Oh yes, Patricia said quickly. We should secure the reservation right away. Saturday nights book up fast. David nodded. And we'll want to send invitations soon. Good parties require advance notice. Who should we invite? I asked, pen poised over my notepad. For the next 30 minutes, they compiled a guest list that grew from 30 people to nearly 40. Each addition came with justification about why this person or that couple simply had to be included. Patricia mentioned her book club friends, David insisted on his golf buddies, and they both agreed that David's former business partner and his wife were essential guests. This is quite a list, I said, looking at the names covering 2 pages. It's going to be expensive. Well, Patricia said with false modesty, we could cut back if needed. But even as she said it, I could see her mentally calculating the impression such a party would make on their friends. The chance to show off to demonstrate their son's devotion and financial success was too tempting to resist. "No," I said firmly. "Dad only turned 70 once. Money shouldn't be an object for something this important." The relief on their faces was almost comical. Patricia actually clasped her hands together as if she were praying. "You're such a good son," she said, tears forming in her eyes. Not every parent is blessed with children who understand the importance of family. "Some parents aren't so lucky," David added. "Some children forget their obligations once they become adults." I wondered if they were thinking about Marcus, if they were congratulating themselves on successfully turning their sons against each other while extracting maximum financial benefit from both. "Speaking of family," I said casually, "should I invite Marcus?" The question clearly caught them off guard. Patricia's smile faltered slightly, and David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Well," Patricia said slowly, "you could certainly extend an invitation, though I doubt he'll come." "Why not?" "You know how your brother is," David said with a dismissive wave. "He's always been more focused on his own life than on family events." I felt anger rising in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "Has he said he wouldn't want to celebrate your birthday?" "He hasn't said anything directly," Patricia admitted, "but his actions speak louder than words." "What actions?" They looked at each other again, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "It's just that he's been less available lately," Patricia said vaguely. I knew exactly what that meant. Marcus had been less available because he'd been struggling with the same guilt and financial burden they'd placed on me, all while thinking he was the only son who cared enough to help. "Well," I said, pulling out my phone, "let me call him right now and ask." "Oh, that's not necessary," Patricia said quickly, reaching toward my phone. "Why not? If he says no, then we'll know. If he says yes, then Dad gets both his sons at his party." I could see panic beginning to build in their expressions. The last thing they wanted was for Marcus and me to start communicating directly. "Lynn," David said, "why don't we focus on planning the party first and then worry about the guest list later?" But I was already dialing Marcus's number, my heart pounding as I waited for him to answer. This was the moment our carefully planned trap would spring shut. "Marcus," I said when he picked up. "I'm here with Mom and Dad at Romano's. We're planning a surprise 70th birthday party for Dad, and I wanted to see if you'd like to help." I could hear the surprise in Marcus's voice, even through the phone. "A birthday party, Sonny. A really nice one, here at the restaurant. I was thinking you might want to contribute to the planning." There was a pause, and then Marcus said exactly what we'd rehearsed. "That sounds wonderful. I'm actually just finishing up nearby. Would it be okay if I joined you to discuss the details?" Patricia's face had gone completely white. David looked like he might be having a heart attack. "That would be perfect," I said, smiling at my parents. "We'll see you in a few minutes." As I hung up the phone, the silence at our table was deafening. Patricia's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass, and David had begun loosening his tie as if it were strangling him. "Isn't this wonderful?" I said cheerfully. "Both sons working together to honor their father. It's exactly what you always wanted, isn't it?" Neither of them answered, but their expressions told me everything I needed to know. For the first time in years, Patricia and David had no idea how to control the situation they'd created. And Marcus would be walking through Romano's front door in less than 5 minutes. Marcus arrived exactly 4 minutes later, striding through Romano's entrance with the confidence of a man on a mission. I watched my parents' faces as he approached our table, saw the mounting panic they couldn't quite hide behind their forced smiles. "Marcus," Patricia said, her voice artificially bright. "What a surprise." "Mom, Dad." Marcus pulled out the empty chair beside me and sat down, creating a united front that our parents clearly hadn't anticipated. "Alan was just telling me about this birthday party you're planning." "We're planning," David corrected quickly. "Alan suggested it." "How generous of him," Marcus said, and I caught the slight edge in his voice that our parents missed entirely. A party for 40 people at Romano's must be quite expensive. 30 people? Patricia said. 40, I corrected, consulting my notepad. The list grew during our discussion. Marcus raised his eyebrows. 40 people. Premium menu wine pairings, private dining room flowers, entertainment. He looked directly at our father. That's easily $5,000 or $6,000. Well, David said uncomfortably, we haven't finalized all the details yet. But you've been finalizing who pays for it, Marcus said quietly. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Patricia's smile became increasingly strained as she looked between her sons. I'm not sure what you mean, she said. I think you do. Marcus pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. Alan, would you mind if I shared some information with Mom and Dad? Not at all. Marcus opened his photo gallery and turned the phone toward our parents. This is from your Facebook page, Mom. Posted 3 weeks ago. Patricia leaned forward reluctantly to look at the screen, her face draining of color as she recognized her own post about the Napa Valley wine tour. That was posted 2 days after you called me crying about emergency roof repairs that you needed $1,500 to fix immediately. Marcus continued conversationally. David started to speak, but Marcus held up his hand. And this one, Marcus said, swiping to the next photo, is from Dad's golf trip to Pebble Beach. Posted the same week Alan gave you $2,000 for medical bills. I watched our parents' faces crumble as Marcus systematically displayed their own social media posts, each one a piece of evidence in the case against them. Here's my personal favorite, Marcus said, his voice hardening. Your book club dinner where you bragged about having sons who understand that family comes first, and your smart planning that lets you treat your friends to the good life. Patricia's hands were shaking visibly now. Marcus, you're taking those posts out of context. Am I? Marcus looked at me. Alan, what context am I missing? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my own phone, placing it beside Marcus's. Actually, I have some context to add. I've been recording our conversation tonight. Both our parents recoiled as if I'd placed a snake on the table. Recording, David sputtered. Every word, I confirmed, including the part where you planned a $6,000 party and automatically assumed I'd pay for it without being asked. We never said you had to pay, Patricia protested weakly. You didn't have to say it. Marcus leaned forward. Just like you didn't have to say it all those times you called me for emergency money. Just like you didn't have to say it when you called Alan. You've trained us to understand that when Mom and Dad need something, their sons provide it. There's nothing wrong with family helping each other, David said defensively. You're right, I agreed. But there's everything wrong with lying to your family, manipulating your family, and turning your children against each other for financial gain. We never turned you against each other, Patricia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, you told me that Alan was too selfish to help with family expenses. You told Alan that I was too proud to care about family problems. You've kept us from talking to each other for 3 years. That's not what we intended, David said. What did you intend? I asked. Because from where we're sitting, it looks like you intended to keep your sons separated so you could extract maximum money from both of us without either of us knowing about the other. The accusation hung in the air like a judgment. Around us, Romano's continued its evening service, but our table had become an island of reckoning. Other diners glanced over occasionally, drawn by the tension they could feel, even at a distance. How much money have you taken from us? Marcus asked bluntly. We haven't taken anything, Patricia said. You both gave willingly. We gave based on lies, I corrected. We gave thinking we were helping with necessities, not funding your entertainment. How much? Marcus repeated. David loosened his tie, further perspiration visible on his forehead despite the restaurant's comfortable temperature. I don't see how exact numbers are relevant. $75,000, I said. Between the two of us over the past 18 months, you've taken at least $75,000. Patricia gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. It's not that much. It is exactly that much, Marcus said grimly. I have records of every transfer, every check, every emergency you've called me about. And I have mine, I added. $75,000. Marcus continued, that you've used to maintain a lifestyle you couldn't afford while telling each of us that the other son didn't care about family. Patricia began crying in earnest now, her carefully applied makeup streaking down her cheeks. We never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? I demanded. We just needed some help getting back on our feet after Dad's business problems, she sobbed. Getting back on your feet, Marcus repeated, by wine tasting in Napa Valley and playing golf at Pebble Beach. Those were special occasions, David said weakly. Funded by your son's money, I pointed out. Money you claimed to need for emergencies and necessities. The conversation was drawing attention from other tables now. A well-dressed couple nearby had stopped talking to listen, and I could see Romano's manager approaching our table with concern. Is everything all right here? The manager asked diplomatically. Actually, I said looking up at him, do you remember this family we were here yesterday for their anniversary dinner? The manager's expression grew cautious. I remember. And you've seen them here multiple times this year, always, with one son or the other paying the bill after they've finished eating. The manager glanced at my parents, then back at me. Sir, I'm not sure this is the appropriate venue for this discussion. You're right, Marcus said, standing up. This conversation needs to happen somewhere more private. He looked down at our parents, who remained seated like defendants awaiting sentencing. Mom, Dad, we're going to give you a choice. You can come with us to have an honest conversation about what happens next, or you can sit here and figure out how to pay for your own anniversary dinner, while Alan and I decide whether we ever want to see you again. The ultimatum was clear and uncompromising. For the first time in our adult lives, Marcus and I were standing together against our parents' manipulation. Patricia looked up at us through her tears, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes, genuine fear that she might lose her children forever. Where do you want to go? She asked quietly. Your house, Marcus said. It's time for us to see exactly what our money has been paying for. 3 hours later, we sat in my parents' living room surrounded by the evidence of their deception. Credit card statements covered the coffee table like fallen leaves, each one telling a story of expenditures that far exceeded their income. Wine purchases, restaurant bills, vacation expenses, and luxury items that painted a picture of people living well beyond their means, while their children subsidized their choices. Patricia sat hunched on the couch tissue box beside her, looking smaller and older than I'd ever seen her. David stared out the window, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The confident, entitled people who had expected me to pay their restaurant bill just days ago had been replaced by two frightened seniors facing the consequences of their choices. The house, David said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. Marcus looked up from the credit card statements. How much do you owe total? Between the first mortgage, the second mortgage, and the credit cards, David's voice trailed off. About $240,000. I felt the number hit me like a physical blow. $240,000. The second mortgage was supposed to be temporary. Patricia said, her voice hoarse from crying. We thought if we could just maintain our lifestyle for a year or two, Dad's consulting work would pick up the house. Value would recover. But instead, you spent money you didn't have and expected your sons to cover the difference, Marcus said flatly. We thought we could pay you back, David protested weakly. When? I asked. With what income your Social Security barely covers your basic living expenses and you're spending 3 times that much every month. Patricia looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. We were scared. After Dad's business failed after we made those bad investments, we didn't know how to face losing everything we'd worked for. So you decided to take your children down with you. We never thought of it that way, she whispered. Marcus set down the credit card statement he'd been reading. Mom, this single statement shows $8,000 in charges for 1 month. Restaurants, shopping, entertainment, vacation expenses. In 1 month, you spent more than most families spend in 3. We have certain social obligations, David said defensively. Social obligations. I stood up, pacing to the window. Your social obligations were more important than your son's financial stability. We never asked for anything you couldn't afford, Patricia said. Marcus laughed bitterly. You don't know what we could afford because you never asked. You just demanded and expected us to provide. I turned back to face my parents. Do you have any idea what your emergencies cost me? I depleted my entire emergency fund. I put thousands of dollars on credit cards. I postponed buying a house because I thought my parents needed help with medical bills and car repairs. And I turned down a job opportunity in Seattle because I was afraid to move away while you were struggling financially, Marcus added. A job that would have advanced my career and increased my income by $30,000 a year. Patricia covered her face with her hands. We didn't know. You didn't want to know, I corrected. You wanted to believe that your sons had unlimited resources and unlimited patience for your manipulation. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of our family's shattered trust settling over the room like dust. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, marking time that could never be recovered. Relationships that would never be quite the same. Finally, Marcus spoke. Here's what's going to happen. Both our parents looked up at him with the desperate attention of people awaiting their fate. First, you're going to stop living beyond your means immediately. No more expensive dinners, no more wine tours, no more golf trips. Your spending is going to match your income. Mexiand, I continued, you're going to meet with a financial counselor and develop a realistic plan for dealing with your debt. If that means selling this house and moving somewhere smaller, that's what you'll do. Third, Marcus said, you're going to attend family therapy, all of us together. Because if there's any hope of rebuilding trust in this family, we need professional help to do it. Patricia looked up hopefully. You'll still be part of our lives. That depends, I said, on whether you can learn to be our parents instead of our financial predators. David winced at the harsh words but didn't argue with them. And fourth, Marcus added, no more lies, no more manipulation, no more playing us against each other. If you have a financial problem, you present it honestly to both of us together, and we'll decide together how or if we can help. But most importantly, I said sitting down across from my parents, you need to understand that love doesn't come with a price tag. Family doesn't mean unlimited access to your children's resources, and trust once broken takes years to rebuild. Patricia reached toward me tentatively. Can you forgive us? I looked at my brother, seeing the same mixture of love, hurt, and determination in his eyes that I felt in my own heart. I want to, I said honestly. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. And rebuilding our relationship is going to require you to prove through your actions over time that you can be the parents we need instead of the people who used us. 6 months later, I sat across from Marcus at a different restaurant, one where we were splitting the check for our own meal. Our parents had sold their house and moved into a modest condo that they could actually afford. They'd completed 3 months of family therapy and were working with a financial counselor to address their debt responsibly. The road back to trust had been difficult and sometimes painful. There were sessions in therapy where hard truths were spoken, where tears were shed, where all of us had to confront the dysfunction that had grown in our family like a cancer. But slowly, carefully, we were building something new, something based on honesty instead of manipulation, on mutual respect, instead of financial exploitation, on genuine love instead of obligatory guilt. Do you think they've really changed? Marcus asked, cutting into his steak. I think they're trying, I said, and I think for the first time in years they're being honest about their limitations. It's strange, isn't it, having parents who actually act like parents instead of con artists? I nodded, but good strange. Marcus raised his glass of water. To breaking cycles. To brotherhood, I added, clinking my glass against his. As we finished our meal, I reflected on everything I'd learned through this painful experience. I'd discovered that love without boundaries isn't really love at all, but enablement. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to participate in their self-destructive behavior. Most importantly, I'd learned that standing up for yourself doesn't destroy relationships. It creates the possibility for authentic ones. The young man who had automatically reached for his wallet at Romano's 6 months ago was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true family loyalty meant holding each other accountable to be their best selves, not enabling each other's worst impulses. My parents had taught me unintentionally one of the most valuable lessons of my adult life, that the people who claim to love you should never make you choose between your well-being and their approval. And my brother and I had learned that sometimes the best thing that can happen to a relationship is for it to be completely broken down and rebuilt on a foundation of truths. As we left the restaurant, Marcus and I walking side by side in comfortable conversation, I realized that while our family would never be the same as it was before, it had the potential to be something much better, real. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family loyalty was used against you, where the people closest to you expected unconditional support without offering respect in return? I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to balance family obligations with personal boundaries. Please share your experiences in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family relationships and personal growth. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with family members. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, love should never come with hidden price tags. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.